All right. That was a lot. Let's take a 5-minute break. All right, so we are back. So a word on the first project. We'll touch base on this at the very end of today. The specification will go online tomorrow. And so that we realize folks have enough time to make sure they have a partner and such, we'll actually have the proposal due this Friday instead of this Wednesday. So website and syllabus and online have been updated. The proposals are fairly low key. For the staff assigned projects, the proposal will really boil down to reading the spec and thinking about it and having a brief conversation with your partner about who is going to do what. Figuring out, oh, I'll do the JavaScript, I'll do the PHP, or I'll do the database schema, or also just navigating those kinds of issues. For the students' choice projects, the proposal will be more like a traditional proposal where you have to get together, talk, and figure out what it is you are going to do. So this is a typical release cycle. It fluctuates a little bit because of vacations and whatnot during the term. But next week, for the design document and style guide, you'll be expected, using your Bitbucket accounts, to actually put together both a style guide for this first project and a design doc. What does that mean? So a style guide will be akin to what we show in CS50, where you make some decisions, maybe arbitrary decisions, as to what your indentation is going to look like, where you're going to put spaces. All of the things that we put into the style category in CS50, you're going to have to argue about and have some really stupid arguments with your partner as to which is better, 2 spaces or 4 spaces, or tabs, or putting the curly brace on the same line or different line. We don't care what the outcome is, so long as your code ultimately is uniform. And so among the things we'll be looking for is adherence to your own set of standards. So that's always a fun religious conversation to have. The design document is the more intellectually stimulating part of that conversation you'll need to have. And typically this will involve figuring out what are your database tables, if applicable, going to have to be. How you're going to normalize the tables and put IDs in one field, foreign keys in another, and the like. How are you going to go about designing the PHP code and or JavaScript, really fleshing out in detail in advance how you're going to approach the project so that ideally after that Monday you and your partner can go off autonomously, pretty much build some things independently, having made promises to one another as to what you'll build and how you will interface with one another. So we'll talk this today and Monday and beyond on how to sort of formulate those kinds of conversations. And the idea is that hopefully they will get easier and better over time. If come this weekend you sort of are standing at a chalkboard or hanging out with your partner and you're like, where do we even begin? Like, that's the perfect place to begin a design conversation. And I promise you by Monday you will have figured it all out. So thereafter, we'll do a beta version of the product by that Friday. Thereafter will be an opportunity for the staff and classmates to review your code and actually comment on it. And then finally, a couple weeks after this whole process, a formal release date where you ship that code. And it will look amazing at that point. All right. So object-oriented programming. This is something that comes up in CS51 and in some other higher level classes. For those who have less experience with this or none whatsoever, realize that for larger software projects, this is pretty integral typically to a design, if only because it allows you to standardize what each of you are working on in such a way that your code bases that you each write separately can talk to one another a little more cleanly than they might using other techniques. That's not the only way to write code, but it is certainly very popular. So you might recall either from this past year, 2010 or 2009 in CS50, we had the CS50 finance assignment whereby we gave you a bit of skeletal code for talking to Yahoo Finance. And if you called that lookup function, that actually took as input, for those unfamiliar, a stock symbol and queried Yahoo via HTTP and then returned to you, the developer, a object, a struct, really, containing a whole bunch of fields. And in 50, we kind of wave our hands at these details and we say class is a struct, don't worry about it. But there are some interesting details that we gloss over. So classes have more meaning than just structs. Whereas a struct in C is just a container for data fields, a class or an object can have what? So methods, or otherwise functions, sort of inside of the object that perform some kind of operations related to that object. So rather than pass pieces of data into functions like we talked about on Monday with sorting functions and searching functions, you just take the object in question and you call its own sort or search method. So it encapsulates functionality and data a little more cleanly. In CS50, we just say public, 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 public. And this is really not the right way to leverage classes, because in most languages like PHP and Java and others that support the notion of visibility, you can use special keywords like public and private and sometimes protected, which specifies who can actually access these fields. When you say public, you can probably infer that that means anyone can access it. So in PHP, that means you can simply say something like, let's say S for stock, arrow price, and anyone that has included this file in their own PHP code, upon getting back a stock object, call it S, can access price. By contrast, if in 50 we had made all mentions of public there private, you could not have done this. So the lookup function in pset7 could have handed you back this special object, called it S, that's a stock object, but the data is inside of it. But if it has no public data fields and no public methods, you have no means of getting access to that information at all. So typically what you would do when designing something like this, if I do a quick copy paste, open up a text editor here, and let's say paste this in here. So if I were instead to do a global find and replace here, and let me change all mentions of public to private. So this is not a useful object just yet if I can't actually get at the information inside it. So what we'll see in PHP, as in other languages, is that you can actually expose this information via methods. They're often called getters and setters. Some languages take this to an extreme. But you would typically do something like public function, let's call it getPrice. And then down here, we would do something pretty trivial, potentially. Let me scroll up a bit more. We could do something super simple like return this arrow price. So as you might have guessed, this is self-referential. When you're writing code inside of a class, this refers to the object currently in question, so the $S variable. So arrow means dereference it and give me the price field. So I, the getPrice method here, can access the price field because, even though it's private, because the code in question is inside of the class. So by contrast, in CS50 pset7, you, the person using the lookup function that we wrote for you, could not use syntax like this. But you could, if we rewrote the class, do something like this. S $arrow get price. And then you could store that value in, say, a variable called price. So this is a simple example. And it's actually not compelling, because what is the value of this? Right? I've really just made more work for myself, it seems. Yeah?
Why can't you just do return price?
Return price. So if you did return price in, so this is not like Java. In the context of PHP, this would assume it's a local variable called price. Good question. So this is not all that compelling, admittedly. So why even bother?
This way you can change the price from outside.
Yeah, so that's actually pretty compelling, right? Especially in a large system where you might be passing variables around a lot, and you're not immune to writing buggy software. You don't want to accidentally put something like $S arrow price, and then just by accident or copy paste fail, you do something like this somewhere in your code where the assignment's actually on the other side. What you've just done now is mutated the contents of that object, even though it really should be immutable. The price was that at a given moment in time. Yeah. Perfect. So if you want to change the underlying implementation details of a price, maybe you want to break it up into dollars and cents and have two different fields, maybe. Or maybe for something like, let's pick another one. There's two variables inside of this object, apparently called high and low. You can think about arithmetic operations that might be useful to build into the class so that you can ask and answer queries like public function get change. Right? And now, even though this is a super simple operation, it's definitely arguable that return, so this minus high minus this minus this arrow low. So you can also embed functionality that, maybe you need to do some intelligent logic there where maybe you have to do the high and the low at different times of day or something. So the implementation details for our purposes are meaningless, but the fact that I can hide them from you and encapsulate this kind of information and functionality, only exposing to you what we'll call an API, application programming interface, is quite compelling. Because in the context of even two people, a partner and someone else, I can commit to providing you with a method called getPrice. I will promise you that for now this will return a floating point value, even though that's not maybe ideal for money. But how I'm going to implement that, you don't need to worry about. And in fact, I might change it on a daily basis as I get better and better at programming, so long as I ultimately adhere to the API that I've committed to providing. So among the conversations that you'll have with your partner are going to be things like this. I'm going to implement this class, and I'm going to provide you with these methods. And you might have no idea on Sunday night how you're going to implement those or what the complexity is. But so long as you agree on this contract in advance on this API, then your partner can start writing his or her code just knowing that those methods will exist. And in the short term, frankly, your partner could make a very fake stock class that just always returns $1, and just let you fill in the blanks later. Yeah?
Are we extending classes from frameworks, for example, like coding that? Or
Good question. We will be. So over the next short while, we'll actually take a quick tour of how we could do this on our own and building up ultimately to a framework that will have both its pluses